In May 1565, the Mediterranean Sea didn't look like a postcard. It looked like a graveyard. As the sun rose over the small, rocky island of Malta, the horizon didn't show water. It showed wood and canvas. 200 ships, 40,000 soldiers. The elite janissaries of Suleiman the Magnificent, the most powerful man on earth, had arrived. Their mission was simple: erase a small band of warrior monks called the Knights Hospitaller from the face of the map. Facing this tidal wave of steel were just 500 knights and a few thousand local Maltese peasants. The math was impossible. 1 versus 20. Most military experts of the time didn't ask if Malta would fall. They asked how many hours it would take. But Suleiman's generals made one fatal mistake. They forgot that when you trap a wolf in a corner, it doesn't just bite. It tears your throat out. This is not just a story of a siege. This is the story of how 500 men broke the spine of an empire. Visual, cinematic title card. The Rock That Broke the World, Malta, 1565 Act 2. The psychology of the ABYE Cesta, Ottoman strategy, was logical. Take the smallest fort, First Fort St. Elmo. They expected it to fall in 48 hours. They began a bombardment so intense it could be heard in Sicily, 60 miles away. But something strange happened. The walls of St. Elmo weren't just stone. They were reinforced with earth. The Ottoman cannonballs didn't shatter the walls. They sank into them. And inside, the knights were practicing a form of holy suicide. When the janissaries finally stormed the walls, they met a nightmare. The knights had invented wildfire hoops, wooden circles soaked in brandy, oil, and gunpowder. They would light them and hurl them into the crowds. Because the janissaries wore flowing silk robes, they didn't just catch fire. They became human torches. Imagine the sound. Thousands of men screaming as they are cooked alive in their own clothes, while the knights stood on the ramparts, silent, draped in black robes with white crosses. To the Ottomans, these weren't men. They were demons. By day 20, St. Elmo was a ruin, but it still hadn't fallen. The Grand Master of the Knights, Jean de Valette, a 70-year-old veteran who knew he was going to dissent a message to the men in the fort. There is no retreat. You are already dead. Make your deaths expansive. On June 23rd, the Ottomans finally breached the walls. They found only 60 survivors, all too wounded to stand. They were executed on the spot. To send a message, the Ottoman commander, Mustafa Pasha, decapitated the knights, nailed their bodies to crosses, and floated them across the harbor to war. The main fortress. He thought he was breaking their spirit. He was actually signing his own death warrant. Act 3. The calculated effort way when Jean de Valette saw his brothers floating in the harbor. He didn't cry. He didn't pray for peace. He ordered the Ottoman prisoners held in his dungeons to be brought to the ramparts in one of the most brutal displays in military history. Valette had every single prisoner executed, but he didn't bury them. He loaded their heads into his cannons and fired them back at the Ottoman camp. The message was clear. There will be no survivors. There will be no negotiations. Only blood. The Ottomans moved their focus to the main towns. They brought the basilisk, a massive cannon that fired stones weighing 160 pounds. For weeks, the island was a meat grinder. The heat was 40 degrees Celsius. Water was rotting. The smell of decomposing bodies was so thick that soldiers on both sides were vomiting as they fought. Then came the great assault. On August 18th, a massive explosion breached the walls of the city. The Ottoman soldiers poured in, cheering, sensing victory. The defense was collapsing. Suddenly, a 70-year-old man, with no helmet and only a simple sword, ran into the breach. It was Valette himself. His staff tried to pull him back, screaming that he was the Grand Master. He was too important to die. Valette looked at them and said, "As long as the banners are flying, I am not the Grand Master. I am a soldier." Inspired by a 70-year-old running towards certain death, the retreating Maltese citizens turned around. Women threw boiling oil from the windows. Children threw stones. They didn't just push the Ottomans back, they chased them. Act 4. The breaking POA. And by September, the Ottomans were breaking. They had lost over 30,000 men. Dysentery was ripping through their camp. They were running out of gunpowder. But the knights were also down to their last 600 able-bodied men. Both sides were staring into the grave, waiting to see who would blink first. A small force of 8,000 Spanish soldiers finally arrived from Sicily. In reality, this was a small force. But the Ottoman commanders were told a lie. Were told it was an army of 30,000. Panic set in. The invincible Ottoman army began a chaotic retreat. They scrambled for their ships, leaving behind their cannons, their wounded, and their pride. As the last ship sailed away, the bells of Malta, which had been silent for months because the bell towers were destroyed, began to ring from the ruins. Act V. The legacy of SHA.Bu was in shock. The unstoppable Ottoman Empire had been halted by a rock in the middle of the sea. But at what cost? Malta was a scorched skeleton. Jean de Valette became a legend, and the city he built on the ruins of the battlefield still bears his name today. Valletta. But here is the chilling thought to leave you with. Visual fading to black, leaving only the white cross of the knights. If Fort St. Elmo had fallen just 2 days earlier, if Jean de Valette had been hit by a single stray bullet in that breach, the Ottoman fleet would have moved on to Rome. The history of the Western world wouldn't be written in English or Italian. It would have been written in the language of the sultans. The fate of millions hung on the courage of 500 men who decided that they would rather be executed than retreat. In the end, wars aren't won by maps or numbers. They are won by the side that is willing to turn their own hearts into a fortress